good afternoon.
Let's go! Batter up! We're taking the afternoon off. It's a beautiful day for a ball game today. The fans are out to get a ticket or two. From Walla, Washington to Kalamazoo. It's a beautiful day for a ball.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this edition of Inside Pitch with me, Joe Mansolino, and my co-anchor / producer, Mr. Brian Lehman. Hope you guys are doing all well this afternoon. Brian, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Joe. Thanks for asking.
Good deal. Good deal. Tonight we have a great guest. Our first guest of this 2019 season is going to be the great Al Downing, former New York Yankee, Los Angeles Dodger. He'll be on with us in about 15 minutes. A great man, great person, great interview. You guys are going to love him. But let's talk some baseball now. Let's talk what's going on so far this season. So far in the National League, going into today's game, some of which have already ended, we have the Mets in first place in the National League East, the Cardinals in first place in the National League Central, and the Dodgers in first place in the National League West. Then in the American League, we have Tampa Bay in front. In the American League East, in the American League Central, the Minnesota Twins are in first place. And in the American League West, the Mariners are just a little bit, a half a game ahead of the Houston Astros. So there's some good matches going on already, which is fun to see. It's always exciting. And we got some guys hitting the ball pretty well, too. Corey Bellinger of the Dodgers is leading the league right now with a .416 batting average, followed by Tim Anderson of the White Sox at .395, Josh Reddick of the Astros at .373, Jorge Polanco of the Twins at .372, and Anthony Rendon of the Washington Nationals at .371. So they're hitting pretty good so far the first month of the season. In home runs, Christian Yelich of the Brewers has 13, leading the league, followed by Cody Bellinger of the Dodgers with 11, and three players, Chris Davis of the A's, Jock Peterson of the Dodgers, and Eddie Rosario of the Twins all have 10 home runs. In RBIs, again, Christian Yelich is leading the league with 31. Cody Bellinger is right behind him at 28. Domingo Santana of the Mariners has 27. Eddie Rosario, again, of the Twins, has 23. And Chris Davis of the A's and Joey Gallo of the Rangers each have 22 to be leading the league in the RBI stats. For pitchers, leading the league in strikeouts is Garrett Cole of the Houston Astros, having a good year so far. He and Max Scherzer of the Washington Nationals are tied at 44 strikeouts apiece. Then we have James Paxton of the New York Yankees with 43. And right behind him with 42 is Trevor Bauer of the Cleveland Indians. And one behind him at 41 is Luis Castillo of the Cincinnati Reds. So things are starting to look good, and it is a great first month of the season. What do you think, Brian?
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun thus far. It's funny when you're talking about the strikeouts or whatnot, it brings back memories of me being a kid and my strikeouts. Except I was never the pitcher. I was just leading the league in strikeouts as in me getting up to the plate.
I'm sure a lot of us can relate to that. Believe me. That I think we all have some of those stories. But some of these races are going to be pretty good. In the National League East, the Mets, like I said, are in first place, but the Phillies, Braves, and Nationals are all within 1.5 games of them. So that's looking good. In the Central, the Cardinals are in first, but the Pirates, Cubs, and Brewers are all within 2 games. And again, the Dodgers are in first in the West, with the Diamondbacks and Padres only 1.5 games back. So things are tight. It's the first month of the season, but so far things are looking good. In the American League, the same thing. The Rays are ahead. Yankees are behind by 2.5. The Twins in the Central are in first, But Cleveland and Detroit are both only 1.5 games back. And the Mariners in the American League West are in the league, with the Astros a half game back and the Rangers only 2 games back, the A's 3 games back. So there's a lot of baseball left, obviously, but races are tight. And as of now, you ask any fan, any player, and they'll tell you their team's still in it to win it, which is a good thing. It makes baseball exciting.
Yeah, it's funny when you say that because, as a kid, I'd watch baseball and I'd be the one out there going, all right, my team, the Braves back then, they're going to win. This is our year. And look really good. And we get around the summer swoon season and away they would go.
That happens with a lot of teams, but you're not, as you now know, but it's still exciting. The season's end when a new season starts. Most fans hang out until the end of summer thinking their team still has a shot, and that's a good thing for the game. The game needs fans like that to care about it.
That's a good point. And there are those of us, though, who get overly carried away. I'm the one that when the game ends and my team loses, whoever that may be, I'm the one that goes, crap.
You're not the only one that probably watches their team lose and say, crap.
Except I say it louder and with a little more emphasis. The neighbors always know, they lost. If they don't hear anything, they say, they must have won tonight. Good to know.
So when your team wins, you don't clap and cheer, and it's just only when they lose.
Yeah, I do clap and cheer, but with baseball, it's a little more sedate. It's more the thinking man's game. So you're sitting there watching it. Okay, we got this guy. He's moving here. We're doing this, and so when it finally ends, you're like, okay, that was exciting. See, I need to go to more games. I'm not like you guys. I know you get to see quite a few, and that's awesome.
Baseball is a fun sport. I think it's the best sport out there.
I agree. There's one gentleman that I'm friends with. Years ago, he used to have a team he pulled for. He could tell you every statistic about every player on the field. And that was awesome because I'd sit there going, "Who's this guy? Oh, you don't know him? Well, he's like leading the minors for this, that, and the other stat, and he only comes to the plate X number of times." I'll be like, "Dang, you have time on your hands." But what it was just fun. It was something entertaining.
It was fun, and if you were a baseball fan back, say in the '60s, early '70s. You could know the stats of almost every player on every team because they were on that team forever. So you got to know, who played each position and sometimes even what their number was, but who led off, who batted second. You would know all those things because it never changed. And I really liked it back then. I think that made it really exciting when you knew who you were playing, you knew which your pitchers were going to be facing which players, and it was fun. It just made it a lot more exciting. Now I don't think, in talking to people, it seems like even on their own team, whomever that may be, they only know 4 or 5 players at the most on their own team, and that's sad. That's not how baseball should be, I don't think.
Good point. I think baseball has disconnected itself from the people, but people also have disconnected themselves from accepting sports as like we used to. We used to take it as fun, and these guys now are just like, I'm busy with my phone.
Yeah, I think that's part of it, and I think the game, in part, did it to itself. I think lots and lots of the fans are turned off by the amount of money players are making. They have to scrimp and scrape to be able to take a family forward to a game and spend $300.
Good point.
And you see somebody making more than $30 million a year, it's hard for those of us who just want to go to a game to understand that and accept it.
Good point. And the problem is guys like Al, who's coming up next, they were playing in a time where they didn't really get that much money. I mean, yes, they made money, but not like these obscene amounts now. And you got to feel for them because they played the game.
Well, and as we talk to Al and as we go throughout the season with some of our other great guests that we have coming on, you'll hear how most of them had to have part-time jobs in the off season to make ends meet. And I mean, no matter what those jobs were, sometimes, a company would just hire you to be in their office and sign autographs. Sometimes you really had to work and have the job. But whatever that was, they had to do it to make money. And it's hard to believe in today's game that that's the way it is.
Yeah, because you got guys who just break into the league. They weren't drafted high. They weren't big money guys, and they're making pretty serious coin.
They are.
You know, especially when you compare it to the guy, your typical fan sitting in the stadium or sitting at home. You know, they don't make anywhere close to that. I mean, I'm not talking about your high-end income earners. I'm talking about your real base fan support.
And I think that's true, but I think we also have to realize, talking money, that if a sport deserves highest paid players, I think baseball is the sport because, in my opinion, it is the hardest sport to play. You know, I mean, it almost goes against all mathematical calculations to think that you have to hit a round ball with a round barrel of a bat squarely. That's a hard thing to do.
As I spoke earlier when I was talking about my strikeout record, I think I still hold the local county strikeout record.
You know, and that goes with that. That not only is that hard to do, but the ones who do it, I mean, they do it well. And that's, you know, you have split second to see, is this pitch high, low, inside, outside, curveball, fastball, slider, knuckleball, whatever that is. And then, am I going to swing or not? And, you know, am I going to pull it? Am I going to try to go to the opposite field? Well, nowadays we know they don't go to the opposite field. That's why the switches work. You know, and the players go over there and do their shifts so that because nobody knows how to hit to the opposite field anymore. So, but as a hitter, sometimes, you know, back in the day, you would think, am I going to punch this to the opposite field? Am I going to pull? And it's you deserve to get paid a lot amount in baseball because I really do believe it's the hardest sport to play.
Good point. See, the guys like yourself who are catchers, they also have the hardest job, in my simple opinion, on the field because that's the one where you are truly involved with every play on the field.
You are. You really are. And especially, and again, back to old-time baseball, when the catchers ran the game, you know, they actually did do their studying and call the pitches and let the pitchers know what to throw when and do all those things. And now, more times than not, you see catchers looking into the dugout for someone else to tell them what to throw. You know, and that's just a struggle for those of us that are non-millennials to watch that happen.
Good point. It's also funny, in the old days, you'd watch a catcher and he'd set up behind the plate and then just creep over behind the batter. And you'd see the batter try to sneak a look down and go, "You dirty dog."
Right. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that was great stuff because then you'd actually have conversations on the field.
Oh, there's a lot of conversations between a batter and a catcher and an umpire. And, I mean, it's very interesting. And I'm sure Al will tell us some about that when we get him.
Yeah, matter of fact, the pitcher's perspective on it's a little different also from the rest of the guys on the field because he's sometimes going, "You want me to do what?"
They are, you know, because they know or they think that they know what they're throwing well, what they have command of, and they're usually right. So when you look for something that they're struggling with that day, you know, they're going to want to shake you off and say, no, you know, we need to go with something else when you're calling that pitch for a reason because this would be okay to waste that pitch. And the next time we need to throw that pitch, it may not be okay to waste it. So let's throw one now and see how it works.
See, I've watched a lot of games in the past, and that very thing's happening. Even the announcers are going, "He doesn't want to throw it. He should throw it, but he doesn't want to throw it."
It's a dilemma. It is, as you referred to it earlier, it truly is the thinking man's game. You know, and you hear people say today how a 1-0 game isn't exciting, and I so disagree with that. I think a 1-0 game is way more exciting than a 15-14 game.
Well,
I mean, you could win or lose with any batter and anything going on.
Well, that's just it. A lot of these guys, it's happening in all sports. If we don't score in any sport a lot of points, a lot more than the norm, I don't want to watch. Why not? Well, it's boring. What do you mean it's boring? That means you're not paying attention. All you know how to do is watch the offense. That's only half the game. A great defense in any sport is awesome.
And it is. And, you know, you watch the little things when you're at a game. My wife, Crystal, will tell you, you know, you sit there and a batter comes up and you watch the left fielder or the center fielder, whichever one, you know, move up 2 or 3 steps or to the side or back. But there's so many things going on that the cameras don't show, that people don't know what to look for. Baseball truly is a thinking man's game.
Good point. Well, I see that we're coming up on our time to call Al. So if you got a moment, what we'll do is we're actually going to dial in.
Let's give him a call and get him on.
Thanks. Sounds great. Bear with us, ladies and gentlemen. I don't know what's. Sometimes we have these. We're having an issue with the internet. That's what killed it at that moment. Bear with us. The fun thing about the internet is when it's great and working, it's like a good baseball pitcher. When he's on, it's great. When he's off, it's not so great. Hold on one second. Our little iPhone connection is at the moment being quirky.
So, let me tell you, before we get him, and I'll go over this again when we have him on the air, let me tell you a little bit about Al Downing. He played for the New York Yankees from 1961 through 1969. In 1970, he played a little bit for the Oakland A's and then was traded to the Milwaukee Brewers. And in 1971 through 1997, he played for the Los Angeles. In the
Hello, Al.
Yeah.
Hello, Al.
Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have Al Downing on, and let me finish telling you about him. Besides playing for the Yankees in 1961 through 69, the A's and Brewers in 1970, and the Dodgers from 1971 to 77, he was the American League strikeout leader in 1964, an All-Star in the American League in 1967, and in that season, in the second inning of a 5-3 win over the Cleveland Indians, he struck out 3 batters on 9 pitches. That's pretty awesome. In the National League in 1971, he was the comeback player of the year. He won 20 games that year, leading the league with 5 shutouts, and he was third in the Cy Young Award behind a couple pitchers named Fergie Jenkins and Tom Seaver. His career was 123 wins, 107 losses with a 3.22 ERA and 1,639 strikeouts. Ladies and gentlemen, the wonderful Al Downing.
Well, that's very gracious of you, Joseph. It's always nice to hear your voice. It's always nice to talk with you.
Thank you. How you doing today?
I'm fine, thank you.
Good. It is baseball season. And first of all, I want to thank you. Every season we've been doing the show. This is the 4th year now. We had a season off last year, unfortunately. But the first show every year, you are always the first guest. And I appreciate that more than you know. I want to thank you for that.
Well, thank you. It's the only time in my life I've ever been a leadoff man.
Oh, come on. With that speed you had, I know you were quick when you were batting.
Yeah, I had speed, all right. I can run from the dugout to home plate.
Oh, wow. That's funny. I got some questions for you. In your pitching days, who were the most challenging hitters that you ever faced?
Well, I always tell people the 2 most menacing were, without a question, Frank Howard and Willie McCovey, because they both hit the ball through the middle. And Joseph, that was a time when the hitters were taught, put the ball in play. None of this hitting foul balls. Put the ball in play, from shortstop to second base. If you do that, if you're quick, you'll pull. If you're late, you'll hit it to the opposite field. And you weren't up there trying to hit your ball 500 feet. But those 2 were the most menacing. But without a doubt, The one guy I never could couldn't get out, I just never struck him out, was Henry Aaron. And Henry was a very underrated hitter because he not only put the ball in play consistently, he put the ball in play at a very hard pace. And if they had that pace now where they categorize the ball coming off the bat, he and Mickey Mantle would be at the top every year.
I'll bet that's true. They, but you know, it's funny you bring up how nowadays hitters really aren't taught to go up the middle. I know back, when we were learning the game, that's how we were taught, was when you're up at bat, you want to try and hit it up the middle every time.
Well, another thing, too, they always taught you to keep your head behind the bat. Number one, so you can see where the ball's going. If you pulled your lead shoulder out, then that takes your head away from the bat. So you can't see where you're swinging. And that's what leads to a lot of swings and misses or foul tips because you just missed the ball. But those were the fundamentals you learned about baseball as a kid. And the whole idea is to keep your eye on the ball, apropos not only at the plate but also in the field.
Very true. And to go with that was another novel concept that you don't see much of anymore, swing and level.
Swing and level, keep the bat level. I get this thing now where guys look like they're trying to hit the ball straight up in the air, and I'm wondering, what are you doing? What if the guy throws the ball above your belt? What are you going to do? You can't catch up to it.
And I think you see that. I think that's why there's just so many strikeouts nowadays.
I think strikeouts are a byproduct of not concerning yourself with your average. It's more about, well, if I drive in the run, but the bottom line is they're not even driving in the runs because you see too many instances where guys come up with men in scoring position. They don't think about the fact that I have to get this guy in. They think about, I'm trying to hit this ball 400 feet, and I look good.
What's my arc going to be when I connect with this ball?
Yeah, I got to worry about my speed and the arc and instead of hit it in the third row or the 10th row.
Yeah, and then more times than not, they have to turn around and walk back to the dugout.
Well, there's nothing more discouraging for the pitcher. You make a good pitch on a guy and he fouls it over the dugout,
Right.
And in the old days, the good hitters, you take the good hitters. Rod Carew was like that. He fouled your best pitch over the third base dugout. Come on, Rod, put it in play, man. Put it in play. You're making me work too hard.
Yeah, that's why he did it. He was going to tire you out. You were too good at what you did.
Well, that's exactly what they're trying to do. And the interesting thing about that is that you say to yourself, okay, he can't get around on that pitch. He can't get around on that pitch. And all he's thinking is, I'm trying to tire him out to take some of the zip out of his fastball. Today, they would start throwing pitches in the dirt, trying to get you to swing at a bad pitch, but your better hitters don't swing at those pitches. So now, instead of being 0-2, you're 3-2, and you're behind the 8 ball.
And that happens a lot. I mean, you see it every game. Some of the struggling hitters, some of the best hitters, you see it all the time.
Well, I think there's so many things that happen, and you hate to second guess what's going on, but I see too many pitchers out, and because there's a tendency to go to the bullpen so early now, and you have so many teams that are really burning out their bullpens, and we're not even in June yet. But you see a lot of pitchers who have the poorest mechanics. And if you don't have, it's like anything else. If you're a runner, if you have poor mechanics in running, you will not be a good distance runner, simply because you'll be tired out before you reach your desired tape. But so it's the same thing with pitching. A guy goes out and they say, what is this guy? He tires out after about 40 pitches. That's because he wears himself out. He's fighting against himself. He's not using good mechanics, and he's not using his body from the feet up to throw. He's trying to throw everything from the head down to his waist. Because he thinks, well, I've been lifting weights, I'm strong now, and I can really fire that fastball. Well, that's for the first 10 pitches, but after that, it's like a changeup.
Well, and that's true. And look how many pitchers today making the money that they make, and all they plan on throwing is at the most 10 pitches in a game.
Well, I have no concern about what they make. My concern is that usually the basic pitches of a pitcher of his fastball and some type of an off-speed pitch, whether it's a changeup or a curveball. Not a lot of pitchers have the patience to want to learn a changeup. But you see what Mariano Rivera did. He taught himself that cutter. That's the easiest pitch in baseball to learn. You hold the ball off center, but you have to have the patience to stand there until you can get it right to do exactly what you would get the desired effect each time. And I don't think pitchers have that anymore. They're more concerned about, well, I got to do this and I got to do that. You got to have 3 pitches. You got to have 4 pitches. You have 3 or 4 pitches, but only one of them is when you can call them when you get in a jam, and that's not good either.
Right. I mean, you have to have that variety. But, we're talking about innings pitched and those kind of things. I think an interesting stat that I was looking at was in 1977, not that long ago, really, in today's world, Jim Palmer and Nolan Ryan tied for the league lead with 22 complete games. And
it was not uncommon.
Right. There were 11 guys between 17 and 21. So, those happened. Last year, in 2018, the highest complete games for a pitcher was 2. Two games, and there are 8 of them tied with 2, and then 26 others had 1. 34 pitchers in the entire league had at least 1 complete game. That was it.
Joseph, when I did the radio show, and I did that for almost 10 years on KABC here.
You did,
and
every
you were
week,
great. Every week I would get the stats. I finally, the last 6 years I did it on Saturdays and Sundays because I wanted the weekend stats. And I would get the stats of every team, and without a doubt, now this was from 83 to 91. And I'd get the stats, and invariably each team in the major leagues had 3 starters who had 180 or more innings, and probably 200 or more innings.
Right.
Which means you're pitching a lot. Okay. Right. And when you're pitching a lot, you learn how to pace yourself. So you're not concerned about strikeouts. You're concerned, number one, about how many pitches you throw because you don't want to walk guys, and you don't want your team out on the field in an inordinate amount of time. But more importantly, you want to control the pace of the game. Now it's like nobody thinks about pitching 200 innings. It's like, hey, I have to prolong my career. You can't pitch 200 innings.
and it's true, and they don't get anywhere close. And there is another interesting thing that I saw that, today is April 24th, and in 1962, Sandy Koufax struck out 18 Chicago Cubs in the game for his second complete game of the season on April 24th, and nobody had more than 2 all of last season.
Well, that's the old process of teaching is changing. I think one of the things that happened as a youngster, I don't know what it was like. You grew up in Inglewood or in Westchester?
Culver City.
Culver City, right around the base. That was baseball haven then.
Right.
And you had a lot of parks. A lot of good players came out of that area.
We did.
And so you learned how to pitch. But invariably, the best pitchers were your best athletes, okay?
Right,
and
including
because
hitting.
They were the best athletes, ultimately they went to another position. It's not without coincidence that when we instituted the designated hitter, those good athletes no longer pitched.
Right.
Because they wanted to play all the time. So therefore, now you had guys who only wanted to pitch. Well, my belief has always been when you became a one-dimensional pitcher, you become a less effective pitcher because you didn't understand what it was like to field a ground ball or which pitches were most difficult to hit because you didn't hit. And that's changed the games totally. Guys don't know how to bunt because you have to play an interleague game. You have to bunt. Guys, they can't put on a bunt. You got to pinch hit for the pitcher in the third inning. It's just crazy, but it's still a good game. And we worry about the pace of the game, but the game has always been controlled by the pitchers. And we get away from trying to figure out what's the most effective way to pitch against a certain batter. The way you can get him out. That's the only effective way. And, you can't go up there and invent a pitch you don't have. Like say, hey, well, this guy doesn't hit a fastball above the belt, but say, but I only throw 80 miles an hour. I can't be pitching above the belt.
And that's what some of them think, and you have to think like that. And it's scary. And you talk about pitchers not being able to bunt. Look how many everyday players don't know how to bunt anymore.
Well, not only that, a lot of managers, especially in the major leagues, they don't even use what we call little ball, the old Billy Martin game, where you bunt, you hit and run. And people say, well, why did you do that? Because your guys could run? No, we want to put pressure on the defense. Hit and run and hit. anything to make them have to handle the ball, because in a lot of instances you see teams today, you see a second baseman start the game at second base. By the fifth inning, he's playing third base or shortstop, and by the eighth inning, he's playing center field. You say, hey, wait a minute. In the old days, they would be called a utility player. Why is he playing all these positions? But, I guess that's what you call analytics.
I think analytics, if I was to write the definition for a dictionary, analytics by definition would be the destruction of baseball.
My favorite team to watch today are the Houston Astros. Love to watch the Houston Astros.
They are exciting.
Because they play fundamentally sound baseball, and all they try to do is hit the ball as hard as they can, and if it's up in the air, it'll go out of the ballpark. If not, it's off the fence. And sometimes you hit it in the gap. But you're always putting pressure on the pitcher and the defense.
And they do. And when you do watch them, I think them more than any other team is where you see hitters actually trying to swing level more times than not.
Yes, trying to make contact.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. And
well, that goes back to our original question: is the hitters I fear the most is the guys who hit the ball through the middle, like Frank Howard and Willie McCovey.
And each one of them were not exactly little-statured men.
And not only that, they could hit the ball out of the ballpark from left center to right center. They didn't care. If you hit it there, we know it's going to be on the barrel, and I'm going to get good trajectory, and I'm going to get good distance out of it, just by virtue of their physique.
Yeah. I mean, and they were fun to watch.
Another problem, and this is one of the things, having been a little kid growing up, I didn't learn how to throw hard. I learned how to throw strikes. And then I learned how to use my lower body because I was a basketball player. And when I started playing basketball, there was no such thing as a jump shot. You threw set shots. But you couldn't throw a set shot for more than 25 feet. I'm a little kid. So you had to learn how to use the lower body to get your body up in the air to throw a set shot. When it came along with a jump shot, it made it easier. So I applied that same principle to throwing a baseball, that if I use my lower body, it would allow me to have better balance and keeping my head straight and going right towards the home plate. Today, you see too many pitchers, they don't lead with their head. And I was always taught your eyes will take you to the target, but their eyes aren't going towards home plate. I've seen right-handed pitchers whose eyes are going into the first base dugout, or left-handed pitchers whose eyes are going to the third base dugout. They don't even look at home plate.
They don't, and sometimes the ball doesn't go to home plate.
Sometimes the ball hits them up against the coconut.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, hey, you're not supposed to hit the ball through the middle.
It's really interesting. You know, when I watch it, I think a lot like, you know, how are you feeling when this is going on? You know, when you see today's game changing like that, it's interesting. And another thing with pitchers, you know, and I know Tampa is doing it, where they have a closer pitch in the first inning of the game, and then they bring the starter in.
Well, there's a good and a bad to that. The reason I enjoyed being a starter is because if they told me the game started at 8:05, I knew I started my warm-ups probably at 7:50, okay? And that would give me, I needed maybe about 12 minutes, 15 minutes, depending on the climate.
Right.
But I wanted that extra 5 minutes to cool down after I warmed up. But when you're in the bullpen and waiting for the other guy to get the outs, you're at his beck and call as to when it's time to go into the game. And you're not controlling, you no longer control the tempo of the game. And I think that works against you. Because if you've been conditioned and you've been schooled to be a starter, you run the clock. Now you no longer run the clock, and you come into a ball game. I don't know if you remember way back when Rick Mundy hit his home run off Steve Rogers.
I do.
Back in '81. And the minute Steve Rogers came in the game, I said, this is a bad move. And the reason I thought it was a bad move, Steve Rogers was a premier starter. And he had pitched probably 250 innings that year. He wasn't a guy coming out of the bullpen.
Right.
He probably wasn't even warmed up to come into the game. And yet you're asking him to come into the pinnacle of the game to get out a very tough left-handed hitter. And he was a fastball slider pitcher. What do you think Rick Mundy is going to think? I'm looking for the fastball first because he has to get ahead.
And that's what he should be thinking.
Exactly.
Yeah, And we all know what he did with that pitch.
And he hit it to right center field in the old Olympic Stadium because he knew, I'm going to get a fastball. The one thing I want to do is put it in play. And Rick was not what you call a power hitter. It was a line drive, but that was his style of hitting.
Yeah.
And more importantly, I want to make good contact and make sure it stays in fair territory. That's fundamental baseball.
Absolutely, and that is how Rick was. I mean, he was a hitter that hit home runs as opposed to being a home run hitter.
Plus, he could fly.
And he could run.
He could run. He could run. Yes, he could.
He could run.
That's why Charlie Finley gave him the white shoes, and he was the only guy who on the team originally who wore the white shoes, and then the Campaneris wore the white shoes. And everybody said, "Hey, how come those guys get to wear the white shoes?"
they could run. They could
run. Yes.
And as a proud American, we're all glad he was able to run and save that flag that day when he was with the Cubs at Dodger Stadium.
Exactly, and had the vision to see what was going on, because those of us in the bullpen were there watching, but we couldn't see what was going on out on the field, and they did it right in front of Rick, and he said, "Hey, not on my shift. You're not going to do that."
Yeah, he did. I mean, I was at that game, and I remember watching and thinking, "Oh my gosh, they're going to set the flag on fire." And here he came. No white shoes anymore, but just as fast. And he was out there and he saved the day.
I'm sorry. Well, it brings up a situation that happened my first year in the big leagues with the Yankees, and I started a game, and they said, "Okay, we're not going to send you back to." I was an A-ball. We're not going to send you back to the minors. We only had a month and a half left in the season, and we're going to put you in a bullpen and let you sit by Jim Hegan, who was our bullpen coach, and pick his brain, right? And I'm sitting there, and it was a night game in Yankee Stadium. We're playing the Cleveland Indians. Their center fielder was Jimmy Pearsall. And Jim had come under a lot of scrutiny about a book he had written and about how he'd grown up. And so he was getting a lot of flack. And these two guys, one come out of right field bleach grandstand, one came out of left field grandstand, and they closed in on Jimmy in center field. And they were going to beat him up, right? Jim throws his glove off and says, come on. Before these two guys knew it, there were like 40 players from both teams who were pummeling him in center field. I said, no, you can't come out here and do this. And it's like said, you can do this anywhere you want, but not on the field. And that's what it reminded me of when Rick saved that flag. It was like, you're not going to do this here. You go out the parking lot and do it, but not on this field, you're not going to do it.
Not in front of me, yeah. And that was, and I mean, right after he did that, that made him the Dodger favorite, and they went out and got him, and, he had a pretty good career with them, too.
Oh, yeah, Rick was a good ball player, and he was a fundamentally sound ball player. And but again, that was great credence to Charlie Finley's scouting system, because you look at all the great players who came through his system, they were all fundamentally sound.
They were.
And there were no home run hitters in that group. They were all guys who could run, and they were gap hitters who could run.
Exactly.
The pitchers were strong guys who threw strikes. They were tough.
They were gap hitters, exactly. And another thing in today's game is when they do these shifts, because somebody doesn't know how to hit to the opposite field. I mean,
don't start me with the shifts. Because you train a pitcher to pitch a certain way. Throw sinker balls when you get men on base because you need a ground ball. If you need a strikeout, you throw the ball up above the belt on his hand so you can get a pop up. The old thing was strike him out or pop him up, and that's the way you pitched. And all of a sudden you're saying, well, that no longer applies because we want you to let this guy hit the ball this way. And then you're going against what your pitcher has learned. And also your fielders, because you take usually your shortstop's your best infielder, you take him and put him in short right field.
Yeah, that's what they do.
It's like, well, yeah, what's going on here?
Yeah, it's the shift. I mean,
well, Joe, neither you or I will ever get a job coaching in the big leagues.
Those days are gone.
And like I know, do you believe in the analytics? Only when it comes to my car.
And and that's exactly true too. Oh my gosh! So let's forget today's game and the frustrations, and go back to some of your most memorable moment. What would you say that was?
Oh, without a doubt, it was my first start in the major leagues in 1961. I pitched against the Washington Senators in old Griffith Park in Washington, and that was the year they had the first expansion, and the Angels were playing at Wrigley Field down at 41st and Avalon, and the Washington Ball Club had gone up to Minnesota, and so they put an expansion team in Washington. And the manager of that team was a guy named Mickey Vernon, and then his first base coach was a guy named George Case, who was a base stealer back in the 40s. And, well, I had bought my first baseball glove to play professionally off of George Case. He had a sporting goods store in my hometown of Trenton. And so I go in there. I said, Mr. Case, I need a glove. I just signed with the Yankees. He said, yeah, I saw that, Al. He said, what are you going to do? You going to pitch or you going to play a field? I said, no. He said, well, we got this new glove, and it was a trapeze, which, Ozzie Smith made famous.
Right.
That was the only glove he used, yeah, and I told him that at the time. So George said, get this in case you don't make it as a pitcher. Well, 3 months later, and after A-ball, I was burning up A-ball. They brought me to the big leagues, and who's the first base coach for the Senators was George Case, and he looks at me, like, what are you doing here? But it was most memorable game because a lot of my family was from down that Chesapeake area, and they all came over to see me play my first game, and I had a lot of kids I'd gone to school with. They had gone to college down there, and they were still in school, and I was actually only a sophomore in college at the time. And unfortunately, that night I didn't hang around very long. I was going to the second inning.
That was a strategy. That was to save you for later in the season.
Exactly. Be ready for the World Series, kid.
That's right, kid. We're counting on you. That's a great moment, though. There's nothing like playing in front of friends and family. I think that's very true, and especially at your age, at that level, that had to be really exciting.
Well, in those days, nobody grew up with the aspirations, I'm going to play in the big leagues. We grew up with the aspirations, I'm going to finish school, I'm going to go to college, if I'm lucky. If I don't, I'm going to the military. And those were your options. And nobody thought about, having a career as a professional athlete. For a number of reasons, that was not what you would call an admirable profession at the time. And now it's not only a profession, it's a lifetime annuity. You get to the big leagues in 3 years. Okay, I'm settled now, and I'll take care of the cousins, I'll take all the cousins and in-laws. Let me play 3 more years now, you're taken care of.
Boy, isn't that the truth?
The money is crazy.
It is. But, we were talking before the show where I do think baseball players, more than any other athletes, deserve more money than any other sport because baseball, I think, is the hardest game to play.
Well, I think it's a very difficult game. I think as far as who deserves more, I would say football players because, remember, we don't take a beating in order to learn our game. If you're a young kid and you want to learn how to play football, you have to get beat up a lot,
That's true.
And I don't know if anybody takes into consideration the concussions they take. But as a baseball player, you're right. Baseball is a very difficult game to learn. And I remember I was talking to somebody the other day. We were talking about the kids who grew up in Latin America, and their fields were less than the greatest fields. Now they're better because the academies have gone down there.
Right.
But guys used to tell me back in the '60s, yeah, we had to clear the field of all the rocks and glass before we could play.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's like some of the lots I played on as a kid back in Trenton, New Jersey. You had to clear the field of all the rocks and glass, and then you had to draw the bases on the field on the ground. And when the guy slid in and he erased the line, you said, stand up, I had to put a new base in, and you draw a new base. But you know something? It was fun. It was fun.
It was fun those days, making your own little field and bases and stuff. It was great. It was great.
Yeah, and everybody played. Everybody had fun.
They did. All right, how about some of your favorite players or favorite teammates, whichever way you want to go with that one?
Elston Howard's the word. He's number one. He's number one on my list. The finest person I've ever met in my life, without a doubt.
Wow.
And I wish more people could have been exposed and met him and found out how nice a man he really was. I was his first roommate, and actually he was rooming with Hector Lopez at the time. And so they said, okay, we got this young kid, but we can't let him room alone. So we had to get a suite, and a 2-bedroom suite. And then I roomed with Ellie for one part of the trip and Hector the other part of the trip. And that was at a time when you had 15-day road trips, which were great because you got a lot of meal money. Unfortunately, it was only like $10 a day meal money. But it lasted. But he was without a doubt. And I'd probably say the second was probably Roy White, because Roy was one of the most underrated ball players in the history of the Yankees. And I think a lot of people didn't know who Roy was because the Yankees have always been, the bombers, the home run hitters. And he kind of, he was there in the 60s. He was there in the 70s when Reggie came. He was still there. And until Jeter came, Roy had most of the secondary records, offensive records in Yankee history because he had played longer. And just a nice man. And, you don't meet too many guys who are not nice guys in the Major League Baseball. I'd say my best friends on the Dodgers probably were Dusty, Reggie, and Davey Lopes, those three. And we'd play cards together on the plane and talk baseball, and always talk baseball, and because that was our business. And we wanted to know. I mean, if the guy said, hey, I think you better do a better job of holding somebody on base, and you took it to light because you say, hey, I know these guys can see what's going on. I can't.
Right.
And that was very important. And so, you had guys like that. I had Maury Wills was the first shortstop, and Maury would come in from shortstop and say, hey, Al, you're doing this wrong. Your arm is a little too high. Drop your arm a little bit. Give your ball a chance to break. So, that was important. So, and of course, Jimmy Lefebvre, because Jimmy was always talking baseball, and
he was always talking baseball.
Seriously, and wanting to learn how to be a better hitter.
Yeah.
But sometimes, though, Joe, we run out of time, and that's what happens. Yeah. And, we learn those things, and right now, Jimmy is probably one of the foremost teachers, mainly because he ran out of time, but he had a good mentor, his dad. Benny was a great teacher.
He sure was.
Yes, and now he's teaching. He's been, over the seas teaching guys in Asia how to play ball, how to hit. And you see players coming here now
Olympic
from Asia,
team.
And they're swinging like the hitters over here used to swing, but they still put the ball in play. But you don't see power hitters coming over here from Asia. One or two like Shohei Ohtani. He's a rarity.
He sure is.
He's a rarity. Yes, he is. Yes, But, you see guys and you gravitate towards people who have that passion for the game that you have yourself. And you talk about the game because that was very important. I'll leave you this story. I remember back in the early 60s, when we went over from Fort Lauderdale to Tampa during Easter week, there was the Orioles were in Miami. We were in Fort Lauderdale. The Braves were in West Palm Beach. And the Senators were in Pompano. So when one or two teams left, everybody had to go because you have nobody to play with for a week. But we all stayed in hotels, but we couldn't eat in the hotels. So we would eat in the black neighborhoods, and we would gather down there breakfast. We would eat, and we'd talk about where you playing today. And then after that, we'd come back at night, and we'd eat dinner at the same restaurant. And then we would stand around at night around the restaurant and talking about the game, talking about baseball, and Hank Aaron would be there, and then Frank Robinson and this guy Bob Thurman and Al Smith, and just talking about the game of baseball and what we see in the game of baseball. And I'm a young kid, 22, 23. I'm taking all this in.
Oh, absolutely. I could see you almost with a notepad in your head, writing it all down.
And it's the old thing, be seen and not heard,
Right.
Because what have I got to offer? I've only been here 3 years.
Yeah, but I mean, you were look what all those listening skills did for you. I mean, that you approached it definitely the right way.
You learn patience, Joe. You learn patience, and one of the things these guys all of them had played in the Negro leagues, and that was their passageway to the major leagues. Nobody was saying, "Oh, I wish this could have happened." They said, "I got my opportunity. I wasn't going to mess it up," and you just sat there and listened. And they were directing it at you because you were a youngster. And you sat there and you listened and you grasped it and, you try to put it to good use. And, I love those moments because I love interacting with other players and finding out what's on their mind. And we all had the same goals. I want to stay here as long as I can, and I'm going to play as hard as I can and take advantage of every opportunity that I get.
I think that's great. And it's funny, you mentioned Jimmy Lefebvre and Reggie. I think Jimmy and Dusty, you mentioned Dusty Baker. I think Jimmy and Dusty, I don't know how they're not managers in the game still today. I think Reggie was by far the most underrated hitting coach that I ever saw. He was incredible. And, he didn't get picked up anywhere else. And I don't get it. I mean, he was just phenomenal at what he did. He could explain it well. Just the fact that those three aren't as involved as I think they should is really sad for the game, I think.
Well, I'll give you a prime example. A couple years ago, Chili Davis was a hitting coach at Boston. The next year, he was a hitting coach for the Cubs. And now he's a hitting coach for the Mets. I think that if you don't grasp into that analytic system, and it only has to take one thing. I watch some of the pitchers in the major leagues, and I won't mention any particular teams, but I watch their pitchers, and what I'm seeing is pitchers who are pitching against their strengths. I mean, it's like you see a guy like Nolan Ryan, and Nolan Ryan was a power pitcher. Roger Clemens was a power pitcher, okay? Tom Seaver was a power pitcher. And you see these guys. Today, somebody would have them throwing split fingers.
Well, and that's true. That's true.
Trying to fool the batter. And the old day, I mean, I told someone about 3 years ago, I said, if I come back, I would like to have the concession in baseball of all the baseballs. Because I can remember, the ball hit the ground now, the umpire, he doesn't have to throw it out. The catcher throws it out.
Yeah.
And in the old days, you deliberately bounce the ball in the dirt so you can get a little scuff mark on it.
And they stayed in play.
Pardon?
And the umpires kept them in play.
Oh, he would rub it on his uniform leg, and then he'd throw it back out. Hey, go ahead. That's okay. You go ahead. But I think what happens is we gotten to the point where everybody is too concerned about trying to control things they have no control over. And the only thing you have a control over when you come up to that plate is that bat. That's it. And you're really reacting to what the pitcher does. The pitcher doesn't know what you're trying to do. He only looks at you, and the catcher looks at the hitter's foot or his feet, and he's saying, okay, this guy's too close to the plate. Let's move him back. And you go inside, and then you go back away to the next pitch. And that's how you pitch. You didn't try to fool anybody. And the one thing you didn't try to do is try to throw balls in the dirt because, most of the time that's a difficult pitch to catch and block, and it gives the opportunity to the defense to get an extra base. So today it's like, I see guys, a guy pitch to a batter, he throws 6 pitches, one in the strike zone, the other 5 in the dirt, and I'm thinking, well, that's not pitching.
And how many times with that they get them out?
Well, they get him out because when they get 3-2, now the pitcher knows that he got to come down the middle with a fastball,
Or depending on that hitter, the one in the dirt.
Center field, and the pitcher walks off the mound like he did something and said, you had the guy 0-2. And it took you 7 pitches to get him out.
Oh, when you say that, that's so funny how I've watched so many. Just, it's the fly ball to center field that's going to be the third out, and they turn around and act like, boy, I did a really good job with him. Oh, that's hysterical.
And for all the listeners, we're not ragging on baseball. What we're saying is that we see the game of baseball, and it's a beautiful game. And you and I both love the game of baseball.
Very much so.
Yeah, but I wish they would just let the guys go out there and play. I was talking to someone the other day, and I was talking about this fellow Doyle Alexander. I don't know if you remember Doyle. But Doyle was with the Dodgers back in the 70s when I came over there, and he was a young kid from Alabama. But really, it didn't throw hard, but he was really one of these guys, just a plotter, work hard. And he'd go out on the mound, and he'd throw 10, 12 pitches, you had 3 outs. And you say, that guy, he can't break a pane of glass. Yeah, but you're out. That's what mattered. And today, nobody would sign him because they would say he doesn't throw hard enough, but he got you out. Jamie Moyer was the same way.
Right.
And today the game has gotten to the point where I think they're looking for that ultimate. They want to say, nobody wants to say I signed a guy who's a good pitcher. They tell you, yeah, this guy has a plus fastball, he has a plus this, he has a plus that. I said, the only thing I want to see is plus is win-loss,
Exactly.
And I want to see this guy who throws hard and maybe breaks a few bats here and there. You don't have to strike out a lot of guys, but you have to win.
And I think that, too. Every once in a while I'm watching a game, and I think, I wonder if Greg Maddux would get signed today.
Well, Greg said when he first came up with the Cubs that he threw hard, but he didn't have command of his pitches. And somewhere along the line he learned. And I always felt that I learned when I was through batting practice because my catchers would come out and say, your fastball's doing this or your fastball's doing that. And I say, yeah, is that right? Because I'm not watching what the ball does. I throw the ball to home plate. I'm watching the ball.
Right.
make sure if it comes back, I can catch it, right?
Absolutely.
And they'll say, yeah, your ball's breaking late. And I said, really? Which way is it going? That's all I want to know. Which way is it going? Well, it's going down and away, or he's going up and away, or something like that. That's what batting practice does. Teams don't want the pitchers to throw batting practice anymore.
Or even long toss in between starts. I mean, it's gone. It's really frustrating.
Well, it all goes into the overall training of a pitcher, and then regardless of what they want to think, pitching is really the backbone of the game because they always tell you when you get into playoffs who has the best pitching staff. Well, a good pitching staff is one that allows fewer hits per inning than the other guy, and really, then that's what makes a good pitching staff, because you can't always assume that every ground ball is going to be right at somebody. So, especially today, and so you basically go out there and say, okay, I'm going out there, I'm going to give them my best stuff. My fastball does this. I got a little cutter that does that, and teach every kid. I learned how to throw a straight changeup at 15. I never threw it in the game until I was 19.
Wow.
Because I didn't have command of it. But once I got command of it, it was like one of those pitches that the guys are saying, "What is that thing you're throwing me?" I don't know. Something might have gotten on the ball. I don't know.
Well, it's almost time to go. Those of you listening, I want to let you know, you heard Al mention Elston Howard. Al Downing is the exact same way that he described Elston Howard. Al Downing, I have been lucky enough to know and be friends with for 40 years, and he is the nicest person that you could ever meet. Loyal, sincere, friendly, giving, just the best person in the world. Al, I want to thank you for all the times we've had, the times you've done the show, the times we've just done nothing, the times we talk baseball. I appreciate you more than you know. Crystal loves you. I want to thank you for everything.
Joe, I want to thank you for your friendship over the years, and I've told you that many times. And reminisce with you and think about the times we went to your restaurant with your family. That was very important to me, to meet your family and know your family, because then I realized why you're like you are, because they raised you well. And meeting Crystal, I mean, she's been a great inspiration to you. And I know I enjoy talking with her all the time. And I don't know how she puts up with you.
I don't either.
But your friendship is really most important to me, and I've enjoyed it. And like you said, for 40 years we've been friends, and we'll continue that friendship. And you tell Crystal I said hello. You take care. Hope you guys have a good holiday, have a good summer, and we'll talk again in the future.
Sounds good, Al. I'll talk to you soon. Thank you very much for being on, and have a great evening.
Thank you, Joe. Same to you.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, the great Al Downing, truly one of the best people you could ever meet. I want to thank you all for listening today. Brian, you have anything to add?
No, actually, I very much enjoyed that interview. Obviously, you guys have a good bond together, but he brings some great stories.
His insight is just incredible. Just incredible, and he shares it well. He shares it politically correct.
Yes. Much better than you and I.
Much better than you and I.
But also his stories, a lot of kids, young players and whatnot would be well advised to listen to guys like this.
Definitely. And when you hear him say, and he threw me in that package only because he's a nice man, but when you hear him say he and I wouldn't have any, chance coaching in today's game, it's sad. The people like him, people like Reggie Smith, and Dusty Baker and Jim Lefebvre. I mean, it's just a shame that those guys aren't still in the game, managing and teaching hitting and things. I mean, they really need to be in there.
Yeah, matter of fact, when he brought Jim Lefebvre up, I was thinking, oh, good grief, I'd forgot about him, because he tortured a lot of teams as a manager.
Yes, he did. And he was the 1965 Rookie of the Year for the Dodgers.
No kidding.
He sure was. Great guy. We'll share a story. But ladies and gentlemen, on that note, we will have Jim Lefebvre on sometime during the 2019 season.
Cool.
I want to thank you guys very much for listening. Please stay in touch. Keep us on your channel.